Welcome back to Books in Review. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Today, we're going to be discussing Liberalism by Cardinal Billot. Now, obviously, this looks like a very short text, and it is. It's actually an extract from a larger text called De Ecclesia. What is that text about, Your Excellency?
It's the dogmatic treatise on the church. He wrote one of the best ones.
Not exactly light reading.
No, well, it's in Latin too, so I don't think it was ever translated actually. But he was a brilliant theologian, Jesuit, and he was very anti-modernist, anti-liberal. He had all the right ideas, and he's just a great person in the history of the church, and he lived from he was active from about 1890 to about 1930.
So I first saw this book because you had gotten one of the hazards of living at the seminary is there's always books around and not enough time to read them all. And you see a book, I want to read that, and then it gets added to this enormous pile. But I was encouraged by the fact that it wasn't so long. And you said it was excellent, so it went to the top of my list. And as we normally do in these book reviews, we're not going to cover every aspect of the book or every idea that it's developed, but we're going to talk about a few ideas to give you some sense and potentially get you interested in looking at the book yourself. And the main argument in the short extract, Your Excellency, is about how liberalism is contradictory, it's self-consuming, and far from protecting the individual, it's really a satanic recipe for destroying anything good.
Yes, the fundamental principle of liberalism is that we are born free. There was a movie in the 1960s called Born Free. You're probably too young to remember that. But
glad I missed it, I'm
yeah,
sure.
I didn't even see it, but there was a stupid song that was associated with it. And it was about animals that are born free in the forest. And that's the idea is that we are not subject to any laws except what would infringe upon the liberty of others. That's the very first principle of liberalism, that we can do whatever we want, provided that we do not infringe upon the liberty of others. That is not the church's definition of free will or liberty. Liberty, in the church's view, is that we are able to elect the good. That is, it's a quality of our will by which we know why something is good for us and we elect to do it. But we are bound to the good. You see, the purpose of our will is to love the good, to attach ourselves to the good. So even when we elect something evil, we are electing it under the aspect of some good. See, if you rob a bank, that's evil, it's stealing, but you're richer if you rob the bank, you see, so there's some good attached to it. So there is always some aspect of good because the will is fixed upon the good. So the animals cannot elect the good. They don't know why something is good for them. They don't know why their food is good for them. But they are, when they see food, they must eat it if they're hungry. Whereas we know why it's good for us, and we can say, I don't want to eat because I need to lose weight, or because I want to do penance.
Or it's an Ember Day.
It's an Ember Day. It's Lent. It's for some reason I don't want to eat. So we have free will. Now the free will and the law do not in any way conflict, because the purpose of the law is to indicate the good. The law, by its very nature, tells us what is the good. So the divine law, the Ten Commandments, etc., they tell us what is the good, and we, by our free will, elect the good. There is no conflict there. Many times people define liberty or freedom as the ability to choose between good and evil, and that is not the definition of free will. The definition of free will or liberty is the ability to elect the good known as the good, why it is good for us. See, so even if there is, say, one road toward a destination, you are still electing to take that road. You see, you're bound to it in the sense that it's the only way you will get there, but still you elect to do it. So the law does not conflict in any way with liberty. But in the notion of the 18th century deists, and especially John Locke, liberty is just the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon someone else. And so and then he said that, this is Locke, that human beings are the state of human beings of nature is that they don't have any established state or government. You see that, and this also was repeated by Rousseau, who said that the proper state of man is running naked in the forest, essentially. There is that the state is something that is burdensome and is a type of evil, a necessary evil. You see, but man should just be able to live free and do whatever he pleases, something like, cavemen or something. So that's John Locke. So, but he says human beings do come together and form a social contract and make a state. Now, because of this idea of liberalism, which I just described, the state sees its subjects only as liberal, free beings. That means it will not see any other institution, such as the church, such as business, such as the family, anything else. It will look only at free individuals. And so it bypasses the authority, or it doesn't even recognize the authority of any of those things, and it levels everybody. I always say, think of it as a bag of marbles, that everybody is equal, everybody is the same in front of the state. So the state reaches down into those institutions and informs them, informs the persons in those institutions what they must think, what they must do. And now we see this with children who are indoctrinated in schools with all sorts of things that their parents would not approve of. But the state wants them to learn that. It doesn't want them to learn arithmetic. It wants them to learn all of these perverse ideas. And that's the state, the all-powerful state. So liberalism leads to socialism. And people don't realize that. They think that liberalism and socialism are opposed. Not at all. The liberal state leads to the socialist state. It makes a super state, a super government, an invasive government, and takes away the due freedoms of individuals, because we do have a freedom of choice in things that we can elect various means to the good end. In most cases, we can decide to take this road or that road. You see, that is the due liberty of human beings. So the state should be not invasive, but rather it should permit human beings to make their own choices as much as possible. It's only when it should only make a law whenever it has to, in some way, make sure that the common good is assured. You see?
Yes, your example about the children, I think I've described the idea of child protective services to some people in other countries, and they're horrified that a child can be trained to call, oh, my mother spanked me or something like this, yes. And then the cops are going to show up and take your child out of your house as if you're nothing.
Yes, that is the socialist liberal state. In Germany, if you can't homeschool your children, the state takes them away from you. That's the socialist state. And it is caused by the notion of liberalism. And liberalism, it comes from the 18th century deism and atheism. That is, that deism says that, well, God created the world, but then he walked away from it. Something like winding a clock, and it's going to go forever. I don't care about it anymore. You don't owe me anything. I don't owe you anything. That's deism. It's a very fine line between that and atheism. It's a practical atheism, because there's no law of God that you have to observe. See, when you are born, for John Locke and all of those liberal thinkers of the 18th century, you are subject to no laws. But in fact, when you are born, you are subject to the law of God. You are subject to the authority of the father of the home, your own father. You're subject to the authority of the state. You're subject to the authority of the church, and perhaps many other community authorities, etc. But you are subject to law. You are not free as a bird, you see. So it's just two different totally different ways of thinking. The Catholic idea and the liberal idea. The Catholic Church would say the state is something that is part of natural law, that is not some sort of social contract, as Locke said and as Rousseau said, where people come together and say, well, we have to have somebody to govern us. It is part of natural law. It is something that pertains to the nature of man to make a state, and to protect rights, and to foment the good of individuals and of the common good.
I think some of our watchers and listeners are struggling with your definition, the church's definition of we're bound to the good. If they're from the United States, which a lot of our watchers and listeners are from, there's an idiom we have in this country, which I haven't heard around the world, which is it's a free country. And this is usually in response to something strange or weird that someone will do and say, well, it's a free country. And part of that, I think, ties to what you said is the original false definition, which is as long as it doesn't harm anybody, that's fine to do. And this is embedded, and that gets us to our first quote. In America, Locke is a massive national cliche who dominates American political thought, as no thinker anywhere dominates the political thought of a nation. And given that John Locke is not a football player, Your Excellency, I don't think he's in the national consciousness of most people. Do you agree with this idea that it's a massive national cliche, and as no other political thinker dominates the thought of a nation?
Yes, John Locke is in the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson was a very avid student of John Locke, and he also got into, he believed in total religious freedom, and that is something that the founding fathers brought in, which was actually against the existing mentality of the early colonists, because they had their various established religions in Massachusetts and Virginia and all of these other places. They all had their established religions. I just read yesterday that in the 1750s, there was a complaint made to this is when Pennsylvania was still a colony, to the local governor that there are papists settling in Berks County. Berks County is where we are sitting right now, and that these people are just all the descriptions of the type of people they are, awful people. That's because there was still established religion in Pennsylvania. You see, so
was it the Quakers?
No, the Quakers actually believed in religious freedom,
Okay.
but I'm not sure exactly. But in any case, everybody hated the Catholics.
Right.
So Locke said freedom of religion for everybody, except for Roman Catholics and atheists. That was John Locke. But he said religion is something purely personal. You see, that's typically Protestant, purely personal. And that the state should be based on reason and not religion. See, religion should not get involved in the state. Everything should be based on reason, which sounds very nice. But after original sin, reason goes bad in human beings. They do not reason properly because of the ignorance that is involved as an effect of original sin. So they make big mistakes, you see? And that's why we have a Savior to save us from the ignorance of original sin. And that's why we have a church, the Catholic Church, to teach us what is the truth. You see? And so, but this idea that, we can make a perfect society through reason alone. That was the idea of all of those 18th century thinkers, and especially John Locke. And it is a lot of nonsense. Look at abortion. What is more disgusting than killing babies? And yet, the reason has brought us, in quotation marks, reason alone has brought us to the point that this is something that should be permitted. And we've murdered 60 million more babies in this country based on human reason. And it shows how faulty it is. And all of this, these other things that, these unmentionable, dirty things that have come about under this flag of human reason, that you can do whatever you please, provided you don't hurt someone else.
And that point of departure, I think, is also informative, Your Excellency. The idea that original sin exists, that is a point of departure for them. They don't accept that
No,
original sin exists.
no.
We're instinctively good. And you're part of the obscurantist sect who wants to scare people with your dark clothing, Your Excellency,
Yes.
and hold them back in the Middle Ages.
Yes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who really was a mirror of Locke. He was just a French, well, he was Swiss actually, but he was worked in France. He was a French Locke, and he was the one that copied a lot of Locke's ideas. And that was before computers and before you could be, accused of that. But he came up with the social contract, which Locke already talked about, the social contract. Yeah, he was the one that said, yes, human beings are. He denied original sin, and we don't have any defects or problems, and running naked in the forest is the ideal state of human beings, and government is something that came about, and it's an evil, and there's a lot of conservative Americans that see government as an evil. It's a necessary evil, but it's an evil. And that's also a fallacy. It's wrong. Government is something good in itself. It can become excessive, but also you see the other side where it can become defective. In other words, you see the lawlessness today, defund the police. See that there should be law there. There should be enforcement of the law, and there isn't. The border that is open. We have laws of immigration. They are absolutely ignored. And
Not just ignored, flouted, Your Excellency.
yes, and nothing happens. I mean, this is a lawless country. This is what happens when government fails, and the national deficit, which is over $30 trillion. I mean, this
an
is
unimaginable
a total
number.
irresponsibility on the part of the government. And this is the much touted democracy. The nation is a failure. Economically, I mean, if that could happen, that's a failure. You're taxing people who are not even born yet to pay off that debt. I mean, it is.
Well, that's never going to be paid off, Your Excellency. That would mean that we wouldn't be in hock to the people who print the money.
Right. I mean, it did not save us, quote unquote, from the regimes of the kings. If anything, we've got a much bigger problem, because at least with kings die eventually, and you can hope for something else. But with democracy, you have this pool, this swamp of people that you don't even know that are behind the scenes.
The Federal Reserve makes Louis XIV look like a tight fist, I think.
Yes, yes.
Well, I marked this here. We can come on to it now, and then maybe I can circle back. I wrote, in America, there is a sense that government is the problem. So let's say even some self-identified conservatives or even traditional Catholics would say, yes, I agree with that. A government is the problem. This is a Reagan-esque idea. But the church rejects this idea. The state is not merely a negative power against sin and disorder.
No, it is something that pursues the good, the common good. It is there to help families. The unit of the state is the family, and to help families achieve their goals. So, and in peace, so that you can't be overrun by your neighbors, or is that there are laws and there is enforcement of law, and that ensures peace. And peace is a condition, obviously, of any kind of prosperity. I mean, if people can come onto your farm and rip up all of your crops and take away all your food, and nothing happens, that's really bad. You see, and they should go to jail. It assures a peaceful situation so that families can exist and pursue their ends properly without any kind of encumbrance.
I think that's a foreign idea for many Americans, actually, the fact that government would help you do the good. And there are remnants and relics of this. One that comes to mind, I think, is in Louisiana. And I don't know if this is still the case, but they used to have a thing called covenant marriage, and it made marriage more restrictive, so that if there was a possible divorce, the state would force you to go into counseling, force you to try to talk it out. The state was invested in trying to keep the marriage together.
Yes.
And I think for most Americans, they would think, oh, I didn't know the state could help enforce the laws of marriage, enforce couples staying together.
Because the family is the unit of the state, so it's in the interest of the state to keep the family together. Divorce is something that just it's like a brick in your home falling apart, or a cinder block just becoming mush. See, the state is composed of families. It's not composed of individuals. It's composed of families, and the strength of the state is the family.
So no family, no state.
The state begins to fall apart.
Does that look familiar to Americans at this
I think so.
Liberalism posits that the mainspring and motive power of society cannot ever rest with the governing authorities, but only in individuals. This goes back to the idea of the hatred of authority, Your Excellency. That's part of it, too, is there's a resentment that anyone is going to tell me what to do because I'm in charge and no one is the boss of me.
Yes, that comes from Protestantism. See, all of that idea of revolt came from the Protestant revolt. The Protestant revolt was essentially a revolt against the authority of the Catholic Church. And so it oozed, you might say, into the national politics. In other words, that no other human being is going to tell me what to do unless I let him. You see, consent of the governed, the government by the consent of the governed. I have to let him, and he gets his power from me and not from God. You see, that's the St. Paul says all power comes from God. And the king uses the sword, etc., by the power of God. No, it's I have all authority, and I might delegate it to somebody, and then you get majority rule, which is mob rule. And Locke never thought that perhaps the majority might oppress the minority. You see, but there was this idea that the majority is going to act reasonably. You see, we're all reasonable people, and reason is going to govern everything, and everything's going to be beautiful. But we know differently.
Well, it's always funny when you see these case studies in economics and they assume rational buyers.
Right.
And where are the rational buyers? I'd like to meet them. This spider webs out into other areas, Your Excellency. Liberalism promotes the free market as much as free thinking or free love. And once again, this will upset Americans who are very used to this idea of free trade and free markets and let the market determine things and you can't interfere with the market, Your Excellency.
Yeah, that was the effect of the French Revolution and the triumph of liberalism. Before the French Revolution, there was a government, government supervision, let's say, of the economy. Everything in this world needs to be governed. I mean, there has to be government of everything. I mean, if there's daycare or if there's anything at all.
Why is that, Your Excellency?
Because anytime you get many human beings together, there has to be, in order that there be order among them, there has to be some form of authority. And they have to be coordinated in order to achieve their ends. But there's no coordination without subordination. That's a general principle of philosophy. In other words, just as you have a big corporation, you have all levels of management, and they are all subordinated one to another. And that's the only way in which those big corporations can operate, is if there's one person at the top and everybody else is subordinated in a coordinated manner, you see. So the same is true of any kind of society, whether big or small. There has to be some form of authority in order to draw the society to its proper ends. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Well, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of just in nature, things that may appear to be random. There's so much order in nature. When you see the birds flying in a particular formation, when you see the mother duck leading her ducklings in particular, okay, this is how we're going to swim. And then I was even thinking where it appears to be random, there's still order. In Yellowstone, when you see the wolves hunt the elk, the wolves tend to target the elderly, the sick, or even the quite young. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to necessarily catch the healthy young elk. And so there's an order there, even though, how did that wolf pick that elk? Mm-hmm. The wolf was able to see what was going on. So even where it appears to be random in nature, there's a lot of order going on.
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of order. Nature is governed. Think of the physical laws. Think of the law of gravity, how it's constant all over the world. Or that oxygen is the same everywhere. You can go to any place on the earth as long as you're at a good altitude and breathe. Imagine if, tomorrow there's no oxygen, but maybe today there is, tomorrow, just like the rain or how much oxygen there is, are we all going to pass out? I mean, the constancy of the earth and of all of the movements of the planets, etc., are all governed by laws.
Well, it's amazing that the Big Bang was able to deliver that with us.
yeah, that Big Bang.
Just like that.
I just like to know who lit the match of the Big Bang.
That's a question that can't be asked, Your Excellency.
Right.
St. Thomas says that the ultimate end of the multitude joining together is not to live according to virtue, but through virtuous living to attain to enjoyment of God.
Yeah, the purpose of creating human beings is to glorify God. So the human beings were not made in that sense for this world. They were made for the next world, and in this world they achieve their salvation by glorifying God. See, so the whole purpose of government and human society and the family, individuals, is the glory of God, not to make a better place on this earth for us to live in. See, which is the humanistic idea, which is the favorite theme of Bergoglio. And that's the purpose of the church. That is the purpose of the Savior. The Savior corrected the path, you might say, of human beings away from sin toward this goal of glorifying God in order to attain eternal salvation.
Could we rephrase what St. Thomas is saying here, Your Excellency, to say virtue not only for virtue's sake, but for God's sake?
Yes. In other words, that there is not virtue is not sought for its own end. It is sought for the purpose of glorifying God. That's the idea. Everything is for the purpose of glorifying God. Every single thing we do is for the purpose of glorifying God. And that's the definition of sin when we step out of that order.
And I think that's an important theme that you're enunciating, Your Excellency, this idea of order and government. It's natural. It's not a problem to be avoided. It's something natural to be embraced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just getting back to a free market. So even the market needs to be governed. You see, otherwise abuses occur, and that's exactly what happened in the 19th century. You had these super rich people that were treating workers like animals, and that gave rise to socialism, labor unions, etc., which were attracted to socialism, because if you let people just do whatever they want, there's going to be abuse. That's original sin. They're not going to act according to reason. A reasonable person would say, if these people are working for me, they should have a decent living, they should live in nice homes, etc., and I will pay them whatever that takes. No, all of those entrepreneurs decided that they were going to treat the workers like dogs, and that they would take all the money. See, and then you had monopolies, and et cetera. Then the government had to get involved, and then you have excessive government. That's what we have now, where again it reaches down into business and makes policies for everybody, and is very invasive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the labor unions are really just a poor imitation of what the guilds were able to do within Christendom, and to create that stable economy. They're using the principle of liberalism of, well, we're going to try to collectively bargain for these people, but they're still using that same idea of liberalism that we started this discussion with, and so it fails.
Yes, it's the labor union came about to protect the rights of the workers, and in that sense, that's a good idea against the excesses of the entrepreneurs, but they fell into a bad attitude and became socialistic
Swiftly.
very quickly.
The idea of separation of church and state, you're actually speaking for myself as an American, is the sense that secularism is neutral. You can a free church and a free state is the famous phrase. But in the text, Cardinal Billot notes, far from neutral, it's satanic. And I loved this phrase: a God whom our rulers can officially ignore would hardly be a God that private citizens need worry much about.
It's precise. He could not have said it better. How the state derives its power from God. How can the state tell you to do anything except by the authority of God? How can it put you in jail? How can it execute you, etc., except by the authority of God? But the United States was the first nation in the history of the world that was founded without a God. Never before in the history of the world was religion separated from the state. and that was true not only in the central government, but also, and more importantly, in the state governments, because the central government was seen as a merely coordinator at the time of the states and keeping them in order, and they would carry out the post office and they would carry out the foreign policy. But the states were the ones that adopted all of those ideas, and did away with their state religions. I've been reading a book on this. I mean, the early United States, they all had state established religions, very much so.
Unless you're Rhode Island, I think that's where all the
Rhode Island was the
crazies.
only one, but everybody else had very firm laws about what religion was the protected religion, and at best others were tolerated, but not very much. Not very much.
Not those Roman Catholics in Berks
The
County.
Roman Catholics were dirt.
Newsflash: the Papists are back in Berks County.
And but it's an interesting thing. There was a group of soldiers from Maryland, because Maryland was founded as a Catholic colony, and they came to help the Revolutionary War, and the other states, the soldiers from the other states objected. The Catholics are going to help. It's awful. And Washington said, no, we'll take the Catholics. But out of an idea of liberalism, you see, that we shouldn't worry about religion. Religion is your personal affair, and it's not something that regards the state. So yes, he's right that it's satanic, because it divorces the most important. It takes the state away from the most important part of it, and that is God. The reason we have abortion is because the United States does not recognize any religion, any established morality, whether it's the Holy Bible or anything else that has to do with some religion,
or any authority superior to itself.
Right. How does the Congress decide what? Are they all experts in moral theology? How does the Supreme Court, are they experts in moral theology? How do you do law without moral theology? How do you do it? How do you establish the good without knowing what is the moral good? You see, so I mean, it's a state that is just, it's like a car going down a cliff.
With parts falling off on the way. And that plays into my last quote for today, Your Excellency. At the very end here, such a restoration we call for with our whole heart, knowing that under pagan legislation, ideally, i.e. what we live under now, under which we now live, individual Christians can exist, indeed, but a truly Christian society cannot.
That's absolutely true, yes. We are not molested in our practice of Catholicism, true, but that is not some sort of ideal. The state should be Catholic, and what is absolutely an insult to God is that the state should be indifferent to God. I mean, at least you could say for the states that were in which Lutheranism was established, like pre-World War I Germany, or Russian Orthodoxy was established. They are false religions, but they had some sense of the establishment of religion. Even Cicero, the Roman pagan orator, said, if you don't have religion in society, it's going to fall apart. I'm paraphrasing. He said it much more eloquently than that. He had magnificent choice of words. But even they recognized that. The Roman state was so attached to religion that a Roman pagan priest, could walk into the Senate and say veto, and that was the end of the discussion. They had to shut down the discussion because the Roman priest said, I stop this. And that's how much they were attached to the idea that the state must depend upon religion.
And we'd like to bring that back, Your Excellency. You should be able to walk into Congress and
Yes,
say,
yes. Well,
enough of this discussion.
Well, they would all have to go home practically. But also Napoleon, who was by no means a religious man, he said we have to have religion in France because otherwise the state is like a ship without a rudder. It's Napoleon.
Well, I think having not read Cardinal Billot before, Your Excellency. His reputation had made me think this is going to be a bit more academic, a bit more difficult. But I have to say the text itself is not particularly difficult, and people shouldn't be intimidated if they want to give Cardinal Billot a try here.
No, that's an excellent. I use excerpts from that even before that was published. I translated it myself in my Catholic political philosophy course, which I'm giving this year. I took a lot from that. I have a whole section from that very work, and no, he has great insight into all of the modern problems, and he's easy to read. It's not complicated. It's not heavy philosophy or anything like that. It really is just common sense ultimately.
Well, I will, shameless plug for the MHT Seminary Courses channel. We'll put a link to that in the description. I think we're up to episode 3 of that course, Your Excellency.
Yes.
And then also be a link in the description to buy the text if you're interested. Thank you for taking the time. Well, first of all, thank you for recommending the text to me in the first place, Your Excellency. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this.
Thank you.